The look on Richard's face when he called me a beggar at his fancy Christmas party is something I'll never forget. Standing there in my worn-out clothes, watching his smug smile fade when everyone learned who really owned the mansion they were all admiring. Sometimes life gives you these perfect moments of justice. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from in the comments. My name is Frank Miller, and I turned 72 last spring. These days I live a pretty simple life. I wake up at 5:30 every morning. Old habits from my working days never quite leave you. I make myself a cup of black coffee, sometimes toast if I'm feeling fancy, and I sit on my small porch watching the neighborhood come to life. Most people around here don't know much about me. They see an old man in faded jeans and flannel shirts, living in a modest one-bedroom house at the edge of town. I drive a 1998 Ford pickup that makes a concerning noise when it starts, but it gets me where I need to go. I shop at the discount grocery store, clip coupons and keep to myself. Nothing about me suggests wealth or success, and that's exactly how I want it. I wasn't always this way. There was a time when I had the corner office, the tailored suits, and the reputation as one of the most successful real estate developers in the Northeast. I built shopping centers, office buildings, and luxury homes across 3 states. At my peak, my company employed over 200 people. My face was in business magazines, and I had politicians asking for campaign donations. I was also, I'm ashamed to admit, a terrible father. My wife Sarah died when our daughter Emily was only 12. Breast cancer. It came fast and took her in less than a year. After we lost Sarah, I threw myself into work. It was easier than facing the empty house, the quiet dinners, and a grieving daughter who looked so much like her mother that sometimes it hurt to look at her. I told myself I was providing for Emily's future, building something for her to be proud of, making sure she'd never want for anything. But what she wanted most was a father who was present, and that's the one thing I couldn't give her. I missed her school plays, her soccer games, her high school graduation. I was always just finishing up this deal or in an important meeting. I sent expensive gifts instead of spending time. I paid for the best colleges but rarely visited. The distance between us grew with each passing year, until we were practically strangers who happened to share the same last name. Emily moved across the country for college and stayed there. She'd call on holidays and my birthday, brief conversations filled with awkward silences. I'd send checks that she never cashed. When she got engaged at 25, I learned about it from my secretary, who saw the announcement online. Her husband, Richard Hartwell, came from what they call new money, a tech executive with an inflated ego and a taste for showing off. I met him exactly twice before their wedding. He called me sir with a hint of mockery in his voice and talked about himself endlessly. I didn't like him, but Emily seemed happy, and that's all that mattered to me. I flew out for the wedding, of course, sat in the front row, walked her down the aisle and gave a short, awkward toast at the reception. I wrote them a check for a down payment on a house as a wedding gift. Emily tried to refuse it, but Richard convinced her to accept. That told me everything I needed to know about him. After the wedding, the calls became even less frequent. Years passed. I learned I had grandchildren from Christmas cards, 2 boys I barely knew. I sent gifts they probably didn't need, and cards that likely went unread. Then about 5 years ago I had a heart attack. Not a major one, the doctors said, but a warning shot across the bow. I spent a week in the hospital alone with my thoughts and the beeping of machines. Emily called when she heard, asked if I needed anything. I said no, I was fine, like I always did. She sounded relieved. That hospital stay changed everything for me. I looked around at my life, the empire I'd built, the wealth I'd accumulated, the respect I commanded in business circles, and realized none of it mattered. I had everything except the only thing worth having, a relationship with my daughter and her family. I made a decision then and there. I would sell my company, liquidate most of my assets, and try to fix what I'd broken before it was too late. The heart attack gave me the perfect cover story. I told everyone I was retiring on doctor's orders, downsizing to reduce stress. The sale of my company made headlines in the business press. I got a very good price, almost $400 million after taxes. I kept about $5 million in easily accessible accounts and put the rest in trusts and investments. I bought my small house under an LLC, moved in with just the essentials, and started living like a man of modest means. My plan was simple. I would find a way to reconnect with Emily without my money getting in the way. No buying affection, no impressive displays of wealth, just a father trying to know his daughter as the person she'd become. It took months to work up the courage to call her. When I did, I told her about my retirement and downsizing. I said I'd been doing some thinking, and I wondered if I might visit sometime, meet my grandkids properly. There was a long pause on the line before she agreed, her voice cautious but not entirely cold. That first visit was stiff and uncomfortable. The boys, Michael, 10, and James, 7, were polite but distant. Richard barely concealed his disappointment at my apparent fall from financial grace. Emily was cordial but guarded. I stayed at a nearby hotel rather than their spacious home, drove my old truck instead of renting something flashier, and brought modest gifts for the boys. I kept at it, though. Visits every few months, phone calls that gradually got longer. I listened more than I talked. I learned about Emily's work as a pediatric nurse, her volunteer activities, her love of gardening, all things I'd never bothered to know before. I attended Michael's baseball games and James's piano recitals. I was present finally in the ways I should have been decades earlier. Richard remained aloof, sometimes openly dismissive. I caught him rolling his eyes when I mentioned my small house or when I declined expensive restaurants because they weren't in my budget. He seemed to value people based solely on their bank accounts and social status. Emily would shoot him warning glances that he ignored. Things were slowly improving with Emily and the boys, though. Last summer when I visited, James ran to hug me when I arrived. Michael showed me his science project and actually seemed interested in my feedback. Emily and I had a long talk on her patio one evening, just the two of us, where she told me about her memories of her mother. We both cried a little. It felt like a breakthrough. Then came the invitation that would change everything. It was early December when Emily called. "Dad," she said, her voice tight with something I couldn't identify. "Richard and I are hosting a Christmas party this year. It's going to be at Hillcrest Manor." I knew Hillcrest Manor well. It was one of the last properties I developed before selling my company. A magnificent 15,000 square foot mansion overlooking the Pacific. I'd designed it myself, incorporating elements that reminded me of the home where Sarah and I had started our marriage. I'd kept ownership of it through a separate holding company when I sold everything else, unable to part with this final connection to my past. "Hillcrest Manor?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "That's quite a venue. Richard arranged it," she said. He's been doing very well at work, and he wanted to impress his colleagues." She paused. "I'd really like you to come, Dad. The boys would too." "Of course I'll come," I said, though something in her tone made me uneasy. "Just tell me when." "There's something else," she continued, her voice dropping. "Richard doesn't exactly... Well, he thinks the party needs a certain image. He's asked that you maybe dress a bit more formally than usual. And maybe not mention your current situation." The implication was clear. Richard was embarrassed by his seemingly lower-class father-in-law. I swallowed my pride and agreed. This was about Emily and the boys, not my ego. "Don't worry," I said. "I won't embarrass anyone." The next day I received a formal invitation in the mail. The party was scheduled for December 22nd. Black tie optional, it said, though I knew from Emily's call that for me it wasn't really optional. I had a decision to make. I could show up as expected, the humble father-in-law, properly dressed, silent about my supposed financial downfall. Or I could finally reveal the truth about who really owned Hillcrest Manor. I spent days weighing my options, wondering what would best serve my relationship with Emily and the boys. In the end, I decided to attend as myself, my current self, and let the events unfold naturally. I wouldn't lie, but I wouldn't volunteer information either. If Richard wanted to make assumptions based on appearances, that was his problem. What I didn't anticipate was just how far Richard would go to put me in my place, or how much I'd learn about my daughter, my grandchildren, and myself on that fateful night. The night of the party, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror adjusting my tie. I still owned one good suit, kept it in the back of my closet for funerals and weddings. It hung a little loose on me now. I've lost weight since my heart attack, and honestly I haven't had much reason to dress up these days. I decided to drive my old truck to the party. I could have called a car service, but something in me wanted to arrive on my own terms. The drive to Hillcrest Manor took about 40 minutes, winding up the coastal road as the sun was setting. The view never gets old, the Pacific stretching out to the horizon, painted in oranges and pinks as day turns to night. As I approached the property, memories flooded back. I'd spent countless hours working with architects on this place, insisting on the perfect placement to maximize the ocean views, selecting materials that would age gracefully over decades. The driveway curved through meticulously landscaped grounds before revealing the house itself, a modern interpretation of a classic estate, with walls of glass and natural stone that seemed to grow out of the coastal cliffs. A valet approached as I pulled up, trying to hide his surprise at my vehicle. I handed him my keys with a smile and a $5 tip. "Take good care of her," I said. "She's temperamental but loyal." The front entrance was lit up with thousands of twinkling lights. Servers in crisp uniforms stood at the door with trays of champagne. I took a glass and stepped inside, immediately struck by how the space had been transformed. Richard and Emily had brought in designers who had draped the minimalist interior with elaborate Christmas decorations, all gold and white. Elegant but somehow missing the warmth the house was designed to embody. I spotted Emily across the room, stunning in a fitted emerald dress, laughing with a group of women I didn't recognize. She caught my eye and excused herself, making her way over. Her smile seemed strained. "Dad, you made it." She leaned in to kiss my cheek. "Thank you for coming. Wouldn't miss it," I said. "You look beautiful, sweetheart." "Just like your mother." Her eyes softened at that. "You clean up pretty well yourself." She glanced around nervously. "Richard is somewhere talking to his boss. I should probably go find him and let him know you're here." "Don't worry about it," I said. "I can entertain myself." "Where are the boys?" "Upstairs with the nanny. All the kids are watching movies in the media room. You can go up and say hello if you want, but they're pretty engrossed in the Polar Express right now." I nodded and watched her disappear into the crowd. I decided to take a walk around, reacquainting myself with the house I'd created but never lived in. It was strange seeing it filled with people, hearing laughter echo off the vaulted ceilings, watching strangers run their hands over the walnut banisters I'd had custom carved by an artisan from Vermont. Every detail of this place held meaning for me. The stone fireplace in the great room was modeled after one in the first apartment Sarah and I had rented. The kitchen layout mirrored the one where she used to bake cookies with Emily every Sunday afternoon. The library's dimensions matched the one in my childhood home, where my father had taught me to play chess. Little pieces of my history, hidden in plain sight. I wandered into that library now, relieved to find it empty. The party sounds dulled as I closed the heavy door behind me. This had always been my favorite room. Walls lined with built-in shelves, a rolling ladder to reach the highest ones, a bay window with a cushioned seat overlooking the ocean. I ran my fingers along the spines of the books that filled the shelves. They weren't my selections, of course, probably chosen by some decorator for their matching leather bindings and uniform height. "What are you doing in here?" I turned to find Richard standing in the doorway, a tumbler of whiskey in his hand. He was wearing a tuxedo that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, his dark hair perfectly styled, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Just getting some air," I said. "Beautiful house." He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "It is, isn't it? One of the most exclusive properties on the coast. The owner only rents it out for special occasions." He took a sip of his drink. "Cost me a small fortune for tonight, but some things are worth it to make the right impression." I nodded, choosing my words carefully. "Your guests seem impressed. They should be. Everyone who matters in the tech industry is here tonight." He gestured vaguely toward the door. "Emily said you arrived. I didn't recognize your vehicle." "Still running after all these years," I said with a shrug. "Can't complain." Richard's smile tightened. "Well, we appreciate you making the effort to dress appropriately. Emily was worried you might show up in your usual attire." The condescension in his voice made my jaw clench, but I kept my expression neutral. "I still remember how to tie a tie." "Indeed." He swirled his drink. "Listen, Frank, I've been meaning to have a word with you. Emily tells me you've been visiting more often, spending time with the boys." "That's right. Trying to make up for lost time." "Yes, well, that's commendable." He cleared his throat. "But I think we need to establish some boundaries. The boys are at impressionable ages. Michael's already asking questions about why his grandfather lives in such a tiny house when all his friends, grandparents have nice places in Palm Springs or Scottsdale. I felt a flicker of anger, but suppressed it. What sort of boundaries did you have in mind? Nothing unreasonable. Perhaps fewer spontaneous visits, and maybe we could avoid discussions about money or lifestyle choices. He lowered his voice. We haven't told them about your financial difficulties. They think you're just eccentric. I see. I could feel my pulse quickening. And what exactly do you think they should know about me, Richard? That you were once very successful, but made some unfortunate business decisions. He shrugged. It happens. But children don't need to hear about bankruptcy or downsizing or whatever euphemism you prefer. It would only confuse them. I stared at him, momentarily speechless. He'd created an entire narrative about my financial ruin without ever actually asking me what had happened. And apparently he'd shared this fiction with my grandchildren. Before I could respond, the door opened and Emily appeared. There you are. Everyone's asking where you've disappeared to, Richard. They're about to serve dinner. She looked between us, sensing the tension. Is everything okay? Just having a chat with your father, Richard said smoothly, placing his hand on her lower back. Getting better acquainted. Great, she said, not sounding convinced. Dad, we've seated you at table 3 with some of our friends from the neighborhood. They're really nice, I promise. Sounds perfect, I said, forcing a smile. As they turned to leave, Richard paused at the door. Oh, and Frank, the appetizers are by the windows. Help yourself. I know things have been tight for you lately. The door closed behind them, and I stood alone in the library, my hands clenched into fists. The sheer arrogance of the man was staggering. In that moment, I was tempted to march out there and announce to everyone exactly who owned this mansion. But I took a deep breath and reminded myself why I was here. For Emily and the boys, not to satisfy my pride. Dinner was an elaborate affair served in the formal dining room. True to Emily's word, my table mates were pleasant enough. A retired doctor and his wife, a young couple who ran a local art gallery, and a widow who taught piano to both my grandsons. They asked polite questions about my life, and I gave them the simplified version I'd been telling everyone for the past few years. From across the room, I could see Richard holding court at the head table, Emily beside him looking beautiful, but somehow diminished in his presence. I watched their interactions throughout the meal, the way he would subtly correct her when she spoke, how he never quite looked at her when she addressed him, the tight smile she wore whenever he put his arm around her shoulders. Something wasn't right. This wasn't the happy marriage I'd assumed they had. There was a performance happening here, and I wondered how long it had been going on. After dinner, there was dancing in the great room where the furniture had been cleared away. I stood at the edge watching Emily dance with Richard, her movements perfect but her eyes distant. When the song ended, I approached them. Mind if I cut in? I asked. Been a while since I danced with my daughter. Richard hesitated, then nodded curtly. Of course. I should check on the caterers anyway. He kissed Emily's cheek and walked away. I took my daughter's hand and we moved slowly around the floor. She was tense at first, but gradually relaxed. You remember how your mother and I used to dance in the kitchen? I asked softly. A genuine smile crossed her face. 2 Sinatra records. Mom would kick off her shoes and stand on your feet. That's right, I squeezed her hand. You're a lot like her, you know. Same strength, same heart, Emily's smile faltered. I'm not sure about that. Everything okay, sweetheart? You seem, I don't know, not quite yourself tonight. She glanced around before answering. It's just stress. This party is important to Richard. His company is going through some changes, and he needs to impress the right people. And what about what you need? I asked gently. She missed a step, then quickly recovered. What do you mean? You don't seem happy, Emily. Her expression closed off immediately. I'm fine, Dad, everything's fine. Richard works hard to give us a good life. That's not what I asked. The song ended and she pulled away slightly. I should check on the boys. Make sure they're not driving the nanny crazy. Emily, later, Dad. We'll talk later, okay? She squeezed my arm and disappeared up the grand staircase. I made my way to the bar, troubled by our interaction. The bartender poured me a scotch, and I took it to the terrace that overlooked the ocean. The night was clear, stars visible despite the light pollution from the house. The sound of waves crashing below was familiar and soothing. Beautiful night. I turned to find James, my younger grandson, standing beside me in Spider-Man pajamas and a dress shirt. Hey, buddy. Thought you were watching movies upstairs, he shrugged. Got bored. Michael fell asleep. He leaned against the railing. Mom doesn't know I snuck down. Your secret's safe with me, I smiled at him. What's with the outfit? Compromise. Dad wanted me to wear a suit for pictures, but I refused to wear the pants. He grinned mischievously. We negotiated, I laughed. Smart kid. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, looking out at the dark water. Grandpa, he said finally, is it true you used to be rich but lost all your money? The question caught me off guard. Who told you that? Dad. He said you made bad choices and that's why you live in a small house now. He said it's important to learn from your mistakes. I took a careful breath. Your dad doesn't have the whole story, James. What is the whole story? His eyes, so like Emily's, looked up at me with genuine curiosity. It's complicated, I said. But the most important thing to know is that having money doesn't make you rich, and not having it doesn't make you poor. Real wealth is in the people you love and who love you back. He considered this, then nodded seriously. I think I get it. Like how Dad has lots of money but he's always angry, and you don't have much but you're always happy to see us. Out of the mouths of babes. I put my arm around his small shoulders. Something like that. I like your little house, he added. It feels more like a home than this place. Before I could respond, the terrace door opened and Richard appeared. James, what are you doing down here? And in your pajamas. His voice was sharp with anger. Go back upstairs immediately. James stiffened beside me. I was just talking to Grandpa. Now, James, the nanny is looking everywhere for you. My grandson gave me a quick hug before scurrying past his father, who watched him go with a disapproving frown. Sorry about that, Richard said, not sounding sorry at all. Kids, you know. No respect for rules. He's a good boy, I said. Smart too. Yes, well, he needs discipline. Richard stepped closer, lowering his voice. I'd appreciate it if you wouldn't undermine my authority with my sons. We were just talking, Richard. About what? Your financial wisdom? His smile was cruel. Not sure you're the best role model in that department. I felt my temper rising. You don't know the first thing about my finances. I know enough. He straightened his cufflinks. Emily told me everything after you had your heart attack. How you lost control of your company. How you had to sell at a fraction of its worth. How you're basically living on Social Security now. I blinked in surprise. That wasn't at all what I'd told Emily. I'd said I'd sold the company and downsized, yes, but never that I'd lost everything. Where had she gotten that idea? That's not accurate, I said carefully. Please. He waved his hand dismissively. There's no shame in it. Well, some shame, obviously, but you don't need to keep up appearances with family. Just then, a server approached. Mr. Hartwell, there's a situation in the kitchen that requires your attention. Richard nodded curtly. We'll continue this conversation later, he said to me, then followed the server inside. I stood on the terrace processing what I'd just learned. Had Emily misunderstood my situation, or had Richard created this narrative on his own? And why? As the party continued inside, I made my way through the house, looking for Emily. I found her in the kitchen, directing staff with a practiced efficiency that reminded me of her mother. Emily, can we talk? Somewhere private? She glanced around at the busy kitchen. Now's not a good time, Dad. We're having an issue with the dessert course. It's important. About something Richard just said. Her expression tightened. Whatever he said, I'm sure he didn't mean to offend you. He's under a lot of pressure tonight. He seems to think I'm broke, that I lost my company, and I'm living on Social Security. Did you tell him that? She wouldn't meet my eyes. I need to check on the guests, Dad. We'll talk tomorrow, okay? She hurried out of the kitchen, leaving me standing there with more questions than answers. Something wasn't adding up, and I was determined to get to the bottom of it. I made my way back to the main party, where guests were now gathering around a massive Christmas tree for what appeared to be a gift exchange. Richard stood at the center, microphone in hand, Emily at his side looking increasingly uncomfortable. Before we exchange gifts, Richard announced, I want to thank everyone for coming tonight, especially those who traveled so far to be here. He raised his glass. To friends, family, and future business partners. The crowd applauded and he continued, clearly enjoying being the center of attention. Now, as you all know, success doesn't come easily. It takes vision, determination, and the right connections. He winked at his boss, who nodded appreciatively. Some people have what it takes to build something lasting. His eyes found me in the crowd. And others. Well, others serve as cautionary tales. A nervous laugh rippled through the guests. Emily shifted beside him, whispering something in his ear that he ignored. In fact, we have a perfect example with us tonight. He gestured toward me. My father-in-law, Frank Miller, once the owner of a modestly successful construction company, now... He paused dramatically. Well, let's just say he's living a much simpler life these days. The room fell uncomfortably silent. I felt dozens of eyes turn toward me. "Richard," Emily hissed, loud enough for the microphone to pick up. "That's enough." But he was on a roll, his face flushed with champagne and arrogance. No, it's a valuable lesson for everyone here. Success is fragile. One bad decision, and you could end up like Frank, practically a beggar. Showing up at your daughter's parties for a free meal, the word hung in the air, beggar, said with such casual cruelty, such dismissive contempt. Something inside me snapped. I stepped forward, my voice clear and steady. "Is that what you think I am, Richard?" "A beggar?" He seemed surprised that I'd spoken up, but recovered quickly. "No offense intended, Frank. Just making a point about financial responsibility." "Interesting point," I said, moving closer. "Especially coming from a man who's renting a house he can't afford, throwing a party he can't pay for, and lying to everyone in this room about his own financial situation." The color drained from Richard's face. "What are you talking about?" "Dad, please," Emily started, but I held up my hand. "No, Emily, it's time for some honesty here." I turned to address the stunned guests. "My name is Frank Miller. I founded Miller Development Group 40 years ago. 5 years ago, I sold the company for $400 million and voluntarily chose a simpler lifestyle to reconnect with my family." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Richard's boss was watching with particular interest. "And this house?" I continued. "Hillcrest Manor. I designed it. I built it. And I still own it, through Coastline Holdings, LLC. I turned back to Richard. "So tell me again, who's the beggar here?" Richard's face contorted with rage and embarrassment. He lunged forward, grabbing my arm. "You're lying. You're just a washed-up old man trying to save face." "Get your hand off me," I said quietly. "You want proof?" He shouted. "Show us proof." What happened next would change everything. As Richard's grip tightened on my arm, a sharp pain shot through my chest. At first, I thought it was another heart attack. But this was different, a blinding, searing pain that made my knees buckle. The last thing I remember is Emily screaming my name as the world went black around me. I woke up to the steady beep of hospital monitors and the smell of antiseptic. For a moment, I couldn't remember how I'd gotten there. Then it all came flooding back. The party, Richard's cruel words, my revelation, and then the pain. "Dad, are you awake?" Emily's voice. I turned my head slightly to see her sitting beside the bed, dark circles under her eyes, still wearing her emerald dress from the party, though it was wrinkled now. "Hey, sweetheart," I managed, my voice raspy. She reached for a cup of water and helped me take a sip. "Thank God you're okay. You scared me half to death. What happened?" I asked, though I had a pretty good idea. "You collapsed. The doctors say it was a severe panic attack combined with angina, not another heart attack, thankfully." She squeezed my hand. "The ambulance came right away." "You've been out for a few hours." I nodded, letting that sink in. "The boys? They're fine. The neighbor is watching them." She hesitated. "Richard is in the waiting room." I raised an eyebrow at that. "Really? I'd have thought he'd be busy doing damage control with his boss." Emily looked down at our joined hands. "Dad, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Is it true what you said at the party? About still owning the mansion? About selling your company for $400 million? I held her gaze steadily. "Every word. I never lost anything, Emily. I chose to step away, to live differently. But why?" Her voice cracked. "Why would you pretend to be struggling? Why let me believe you were barely getting by?" I sighed, feeling the weight of years of mistakes. After my heart attack, I realized I'd spent my entire life chasing success and missing what mattered most. You. I thought if I came back into your life as the wealthy businessman who'd neglected you, you'd see me the same way you always had. I wanted us to connect as people, not as a successful father and his disappointed daughter. Tears filled her eyes. "So you lied to me." "I never actually said I was broke," I pointed out gently. "I said I'd sold the company and downsized, which was true." You and Richard filled in the blanks with assumptions I didn't correct. I paused. But yes, I wasn't completely honest, and I'm sorry for that. She wiped at her tears. Do you know what Richard's been telling people? That you made bad investments, that you lost everything, that you were too proud to ask for help. He's been using you as an example of failure in his business talks. That stung, but it wasn't entirely surprising. And you? Did you believe him? Her silence was answer enough. Emily, I said softly, there's something else going on here, isn't there? Something beyond Richard's embarrassment about my supposed financial situation. She looked toward the door, as if afraid someone might be listening. Richard's company is in trouble, she finally whispered. Serious trouble. He's been putting on a front for months. The fancy parties, the expensive gifts, the trips. It's all for show. He needed to impress his investors tonight, needed them to think everything was stable. And renting Hillcrest Manor was part of that show, she nodded. He didn't rent it exactly. He told me he found it through a real estate contact who owed him a favor. I had no idea. I never thought... She trailed off, then looked at me with fresh eyes. You really own it? Through a holding company, yes. It was the last property I kept when I sold everything else. I couldn't let it go. I designed it with your mother in mind. Every room has something of her in it. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. I felt it, you know. The first time I walked through it. Something about the kitchen especially. It reminded me of home. It's the same layout as our old house, I said. Where you and your mum used to bake together. She covered her mouth, stifling a sob. Why didn't you tell me? I was going to eventually. But then I saw how Richard was with you. Always controlling, always belittling. I started to worry about what was really happening in your marriage. Emily's shoulders slumped. It wasn't always like this. When we first met, he was ambitious but kind, supportive of my nursing career, excited about starting a family. She twisted her wedding ring. The more successful he became, the more distant he grew. And the last year, since the company started struggling, he's been impossible. Angry all the time, drinking too much, lying about everything. Have you thought about leaving? I asked carefully. With what? She gave a hollow laugh. My nursing salary. The boy's private school tuition alone would eat up most of it. And Richard's made it clear that if I ever left, he'd make sure I had nothing. I reached for her hand again. Emily, you're my daughter. You'll always have everything you need. And so will the boys. She started to respond, but the door opened and a doctor walked in, followed by a nurse. Mr. Miller, good to see you awake. I'm Dr. Patel. She checked the monitors and made some notes. Your vitals are looking stable. How are you feeling? Like I've been hit by a truck, but I'll live, she smiled. We'll need to keep you overnight for observation, but if everything continues to look good, you should be able to go home tomorrow. After she left, Emily stood up. I should let you rest, and I need to check on the boys. What about Richard? I asked. Her expression hardened. I'll deal with Richard. Be careful, I warned. Men like that don't take humiliation well. She leaned down to kiss my forehead. I'm stronger than you think, Dad. I am your daughter, after all. After she left, I lay there staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had happened. The lies, the misunderstandings, the years wasted. I must have dozed off because when I opened my eyes again, sunlight was streaming through the blinds, and someone else was sitting in the chair beside my bed, mourning. Grandpa, it was Michael, my older grandson, looking serious in jeans and a sweater, his dark hair falling across his forehead just like Emily's used to. Hey, Buddy, I said, genuinely surprised. Shouldn't you be in school? It's Saturday, he reminded me. Mom's talking to the doctor. She said I could sit with you for a bit. I adjusted the bed to sit up straighter. That's nice of you. Everything okay at home? He shrugged, picking at a loose thread on his sleeve. Dad didn't come home last night. Mom was on the phone a lot. She cried. My heart sank. I'm sorry to hear that. Is it true what everyone's saying? That you're rich and you own that big house we had the party at? Kids, always straight to the point. Yes, it's true. But having money isn't what makes someone rich or poor, Michael. That's what James said you told him. He looked up at me, his eyes too knowing for a 10-year-old. Why did you let Dad say all those mean things about you if you could have proved him wrong? I considered how to answer. Sometimes proving someone wrong isn't as important as understanding why they need to believe they're right. He thought about that for a moment. Dad needs everyone to think he's the best. The richest, the smartest, the most important. And what do you think about that? I think it's sad, he said simply. To need everyone to think you're something you're not. Out of the mouths of babes, indeed. That's very insightful, Michael. Mom says we might stay with you for a while. Is that okay? The question caught me off guard. Of course it's okay. You and James and your mom are always welcome anywhere I am. He nodded, satisfied. Good, because Mom's really mad at Dad, and I don't think she wants to go home. Before I could ask more questions, Emily returned with Dr. Patel. After a final checkup and some instructions about medication and follow-up appointments, I was discharged. Emily drove me to my small house in her SUV with the boys in the back seat. We're going to stay here tonight if that's okay, she said quietly as we pulled into my driveway. I need some time to figure things out. You know you're welcome, I said. But it's pretty cramped. I only have the one spare bedroom. The boys can share the bed. I'll take the couch. Her knuckles were white on the steering wheel. It's just for a few days until I can sort things out with Richard. Inside, the boys explored my modest home with surprising enthusiasm. James declaring the backyard awesome despite its small size, and Michael examining my bookshelves with interest. While Emily got them settled, I made a phone call to my lawyer, Marcus, who'd been handling my affairs for 3 decades. I explained the situation briefly. So your son-in-law has been using your property without permission, essentially committing fraud by presenting it as a favor from a contact. Marcus summarized. And now your daughter and grandsons need a safe place to stay while they figure out next steps. That's about the size of it, I confirmed. Give me 24 hours, he said. So I'll have some options for you by then. That evening we had a simple dinner around my small kitchen table. The boys, surprisingly, seemed more relaxed than I'd ever seen them. They helped with the dishes without being asked, and then settled in the living room with a board game I'd bought months ago, hoping they might visit someday. Emily joined me on the back porch, where I was sipping decaf coffee and watching the sunset. You okay? I asked. Not really. She wrapped her sweater tighter around herself. Richard finally called. He's furious, threatening all sorts of things, says I've humiliated him, that his career is over, that it's all my fault for inviting you to the party. What do you want to do? She looked out at the darkening sky. I don't know yet. But I know I can't go back to how things were. The boys deserve better. I deserve better. Yes, you do. I hesitated, then decided it was time for complete honesty. Emily, there's something else you should know. I've set up trusts for you and the boys. You've had them since the day I sold the company. You can access yours anytime you want. It's more than enough to support you all comfortably for the rest of your lives, regardless of what happens with Richard. She stared at me. Are you serious? Completely. I may have downsized my life, but I made sure you and the boys would always be taken care of. I wanted our relationship to be about more than money. She was quiet for a long moment. All these years I thought you chose your work over me, over us. That money meant more to you than family. I did make that choice for too long, I admitted, but not because I valued money more. I think I was running from the pain of losing your mother. Work was something I could control when everything else felt like it was falling apart. I understand that better now, she said softly. Especially after watching Richard these past few years. The more he felt he was failing, the more obsessed he became with appearances, with proving himself. We sat in companionable silence as darkness fell completely. From inside, we could hear the boys laughing over their game. What will you do about the mansion? She asked eventually. I shrugged. I never intended to live there myself. Too many rooms for one old man. I always thought of it as something I might leave to you someday. A place for you and your family. Without Richard. I mean with whoever makes you happy. Emily, that's all I've ever wanted for you. The next morning, Marcus called with a plan. By noon, we were meeting him at his office downtown. The boys waiting in the reception area with Marcus's assistant, who had thoughtfully provided snacks and video games. We have several options, Marcus explained, laying out documents on his desk. But the simplest might be this. Frank transfers ownership of Hillcrest Manor to you directly, Emily. As the legal owner, you can then decide who lives there. Given that you're still legally married to Richard, there might be complications with community property laws. But we can file for an emergency injunction to prevent him from accessing or disposing of the property while divorce proceedings are initiated. Emily looked overwhelmed. I haven't even said I'm filing for divorce. You don't have to decide right now, I assured her. But having the house in your name gives you leverage and security, regardless of what you decide. She took a deep breath. If I do this, if I take the house, what's to stop Richard from claiming I was part of some scheme? That I knew all along you owned it? Marcus smiled thinly. The fact that he told multiple witnesses, including his colleagues and boss, that he arranged access to the property through his own contacts. That's fraud, plain and simple. If he wants to implicate you in that, he'll only be digging himself a deeper hole. By the end of the day, the papers were signed. Emily was now the legal owner of Hillcrest Manor, and Marcus had arranged for security to change the locks and set up a temporary system until more permanent measures could be installed. Richard, predictably, didn't take the news well. His lawyer called Marcus within hours, threatening lawsuits, criminal charges, even custody challenges. Marcus calmly explained the situation. Richard had committed fraud, potentially jeopardized his company further by misrepresenting his access to assets, and put his family in an untenable position. If he wanted to pursue legal action, he was welcome to try, but he might want to consider the implications for his already precarious professional reputation. The threat stopped almost immediately. 3 days later, Emily and the boys moved into Hillcrest Manor. I helped them settle in, watching as James ran from room to room, exclaiming over the view from every window, and Michael immediately claimed the library as his favorite spot. Emily moved through the house with a growing sense of ownership, already planning which room would be best for the boys to share, which might become a home office for her nursing paperwork. You should stay too. Dad, she said as we stood in the kitchen unpacking dishes, this place is way too big for just the 3 of us. I shook my head. I'm happy in my little house, but I'll visit often, I promise. And I have. Over the past year, I've had dinner at Hillcrest Manor twice a week. I've helped the boys build a tree house in the massive oak that overlooks the ocean. I've sat with Emily on the terrace, talking long into the night about everything we missed during those years apart. Richard eventually agreed to a divorce settlement that was surprisingly reasonable, given his initial fury. I suspect his lawyers made it clear that fighting Emily would only expose his financial misdeeds further. He moved to Seattle for a fresh start with a new company, and while his relationship with the boys remains strained, they speak to him weekly by video call. Emily has flourished. She returned to nursing full-time, specializing in geriatric care, and recently started a program to bring therapy animals to nursing homes. The boys are thriving in their new school, making friends, joining sports teams, developing into the kind, thoughtful young men I always knew they could be. As for me, I still live in my modest house at the edge of town. I still drive my old truck. I still clip coupons and shop at the discount grocery store. Not because I need to, but because I've learned that simplicity brings its own kind of wealth. Last Christmas, we celebrated at Hillcrest Manor again, a much smaller gathering, just family and a few close friends. As I watched Emily laughing with her new boyfriend, a kind, soft-spoken pediatrician who looks at her like she hung the moon, and the boys arguing good-naturedly over a board game, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in decades. Sometimes the richest moments in life come after the greatest losses. Sometimes the most valuable things we can give each other aren't things at all, but truth, forgiveness, and time. Richard called me a beggar that night, not knowing I owned the mansion he was standing in. But the real poverty was his. A man so desperate for status and approval that he lost sight of the true wealth he already had in his family. I may have made many mistakes in my life, prioritizing success over presence, achievement over connection. But I'm grateful that I got a second chance to show my daughter and grandsons what really matters. Not the size of your house or the balance in your bank account, but the love you give freely and the integrity with which you live. Money can buy a mansion, but it can't make it a home. Only love can do that. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more. And let me know in the comments how you'd rate this story from 0 to 10. Your feedback means everything to an old storyteller like me.